evening, and welcome to our second dance talk of 2022. I should also say happy Mardi Gras, happy voting day. Thank you so much for coming out on those two important days. And I know that I was not the reason you came out tonight, that I just assembled this beautiful panel of our most cherished principal dancers to talk to you about Sylvia. Tonight's audience, this is the first dance talk since February of 2020 where we've had partly a live audience. But it is a hybrid audience. We've got folks joining us online and a few folks here in the Margaret Alcax Williams Dance Lab. So at the end, as we always do, we'll take questions, and we'll take questions from both sides of the camera. Before we get started on revisiting Sylvia, which had its world premiere in February of 2019, I'm going to introduce, although I don't really think I need to, I still am going to introduce our panel. So sitting next to me is Jessica Collado, who is the Cullen Trust for the Performing Arts Principal Dancer. She trained at the Houston Ballet Academy and joined the company in 2004. She was promoted to demi-soloist in 2009, soloist in 2011, first soloist in 2013, and principal dancer in 2017. And in a few weeks, she will reprise the role of Artemis. So welcome to Jessica. Next to her is Melody Mennite, the Melza M. Bar principal dancer. She was also a student at the Houston Ballet Academy and joined the company in 2001. She was promoted to soloist in 2005 and principal dancer in 2008, and you will see her in that gorgeous pink dress as Psyche. And then Karina Gonzalez, who is the Houston Ballet Guild principal dancer, joined Houston Ballet as a soloist in 2010 and was promoted to principal dancer in 2013. Prior to joining Houston Ballet, she was a principal dancer with Tulsa Ballet, and she will be returning to the title role of Sylvia. Yay. I did assemble a star-studded panel for you, so I'm excited to have this discussion, but before we dive into Sylvia, if you haven't already, please run, don't walk, run and get your tickets for Jules this weekend. We had a gorgeous set of performances last week, and if you haven't seen it yet, you don't want to miss it. It's one of Balanchine's masterpieces, and all of these ladies dance beautifully in it. So you can see them 2 weekends in a row, Jules into Sylvia. In a traditional, I'm just going to talk to all of you now. In a traditional full-length ballet, there's usually one lead female dancer. But in Sylvia, for those of you who have seen it, you know that there's 3 leads, thus my 3 panelists. Let's start there. Can you each tell us a little bit about the heroine that you play, who she is and what her personality is, and how her choreography reflects that? And Jessica, let's start with you.
There we are. So Artemis is a huntress. She is a goddess, and besides Zeus and her aunt, I think Aphrodite, she is pretty much high up there in the power scheme of things. She has a twin brother, Apollo, and the two of them have a very kind of competitive relationship with each other. They're constantly fighting for their father's approval or his favoritism, and Apollo always seems to win, which just makes her so angry. She also is the leader of this nymph army of women, and she leads them, and they hunt together. So she's pretty much a tough girl. She doesn't, display her emotions out. She it always appears calm and collected. And then I can go into Orion now a little bit, or?
Well, it's up to you. I wondered, since you talked about her being, she's really the leader of the nymphs, I wonder what it feels like, that iconic music that comes on and you have literally an army of people behind you. I wonder what that feels like when that moment happens.
It's the best. Yeah. It's like the Sylvia anthem. Yeah, that scene is great. I think what you picture in your head when you think of Sylvia is like all of these girls charging towards the audience with their weapons, and it's a really powerful scene. I like it. And choreography-wise, as a nymph and as these warriors, we have a lot of jumping, a lot of like staccato movement that's sharp, and that kind of defines us character-wise in that way too.
Melody, let's move on to you. Psyche is not a god. She is on this earth. She's immortal. Tell us a little bit about her.
Sure. So yeah, Psyche is fully human. I think that even describes a lot of what happens in her story arc. She has a lot of foibles. She gets duped a lot. She's led by her heart and has a very human family and human experience, and that's quite different from both of these ladies because she's learning as she goes, I think, like humans do. She's really joyful. She's in her opening scene, she's literally just running through flowers and picking flowers in a meadow, and that's how Psyche is.
She doesn't think about consequences all that much, right?
No. I guess that's the other aspect of her that's important for her character is that she's also like too curious. I remember when we started this ballet that Stanton said that's really her downfall, her biggest downfall, is that not only is she naive and open and falls into traps, but she's also very curious to a fault, and that gets her in a lot of trouble. Yeah.
And Jessica was talking about how her choreography is strong and staccato, maybe even athletic as a warrior. How would you describe how Psyche comes to life in the choreography?
Her movement is much more romantic and wispy, and I mean, she's in this long satin dress, and so she just sort of like floats across the meadows, floats across hell. So she's kind of floaty. Mm-hmm.
You can probably take that in more than one way. So for Karina, Sylvia is a combination in a way, right? I mean, the way we sort of talked about the hierarchy in Sylvia when it premiered is that, Jessica's character Artemis comes from Mount Olympus. Melody's character Psyche comes from the earth, comes from where we all live. But you're somewhere in between, right? We called your character and the characters like her in the ballet demigods. Do you want to talk a little bit about her?
Yes, so Sylvia is part of Artemis' army, but I think the difference with her is that she feels like she doesn't belong there. She's kind of always looking for something else to fulfill her happiness, and so she kind of stays behind all the time. You talk a little bit of the armor, is that how you pronounce? Then yeah, at any moment she just take it off, like she just doesn't feel like she belongs there. Besides that, that's her duty. It's her job to fight with the girls, but she doesn't really love it. And I think you can see in the choreography how tender she is, especially when she's with the shepherd. And I'm sure we will talk about it later, but I think choreographically she's sweet and she's kind of funny, but also she has to be strong and she has to bring the skills, all her strength and her power when she has to defend the shepherd, and the story goes on. But yeah, I think she's in between the two worlds, and which I think is a challenge to portray, because you have to be this beautiful ballerina and then you have to be this strong, grounded warrior at some moments.
Do you actually perform in the army scenes? I can't remember if you are one of the girls at that time?
Yes.
Okay.
So her first scene is with the army, that we're all coming down to the stage. And actually it's funny because when Jessica was talking about it, I feel like I tried to portray that. Like, I'm not as happy as everybody else. Like, yes, this is my duty, this is my job, I do this with the sword. But so I feel like, I don't know if you can see it, because there is like, I don't know how many women on stage at the moment. But yeah, that's the moment that you can see Sylvia entering the stage.
So while the rest of the warriors are ready to go to battle, you're a little bit less enthusiastic, while still staying in time with all the other dancers on stage. Yeah, that's great. So let's transition to your love interest. I think the two of you have, or I should say Sylvia and Psyche have more traditional love interests. Let's start with you, Karina. Can you talk about the shepherd and how you meet? And I think in particular for you, how, I'm just gonna stop there because I'm sure you'll say everything.
Yeah, so there is a scene that she stays behind from the army, and she's just in the river enjoying and dreaming and just being here. And that's when Eros comes and cast a spell on her and telling her that she has to fall in love with the first person she sees, and that's the shepherd, because somehow he was around, and so the two of them stay together. And it's super interesting because when Stanton started choreographing this scene, I totally thought it was going to be different. Like, I never pictured her funny in a way, but yeah, I guess he kind of said one day that it looks like Pepe Le Pew, you know, the cartoon. Then she's just so in love with this person, then you have to go and be with me because I need you. So the first scene with the pas de deux, it's kind of like that. It's just her want him so badly, then she jumps on him and grab him and turn him, and it's super, super fun pas de deux. But through the story, I think she realized that she does love him, and there is love in there, and then she finally found that empty, you know, she filled that emptiness that she was kind of waiting in there, until she found out that it was all because she was in a spell. But yeah, third act is when Artemis tell her, yes, go on, you can go and love him, and that's how we can have a happy ending forever.
So that first pas de deux where you are, I mean, so I love the analogy of the Pepe Le Pew cartoon. So if you, hopefully everybody has seen it. And if you haven't, you can Google it after. But the skunk is madly in love with a cat, and who just wants to get away from the stinky skunk. And I mean, so that's, Connor's essentially that cat. And you've had a lot of pas de deux with him where that's not the case. So how, like, I know that we're talking about it now, but it totally comes across on stage. So how does the timing and you know the coordination of the partnering to make us be able to read that in the audience? Can you talk a little bit about the coordination of that pas?
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the biggest challenges, because normally as a dancer or any other ballet, the man is in charge of the partnering of the steps. So most of the time we cannot wait for your partner to move you around, and this is completely the opposite. It's him. I mean, there are moments that literally his hands are in the air and I'm grabbing with everything I have and on him. So it took a little bit of, a lot of strength. I remember a couple times that I would finish the rehearsal and my arms will be so sore just because I'm trying to hang myself without help, comparing with any other ballet that I have done. I think this is totally different. And yeah, I think we have the other pas de deux, I feel like is hair, showing him hair strength. And I wish I actually can talk, because in my mind I'm going through and I'm like, yes, look at me, look at what I can do, and look at how powerful I am. And then also there is the tender moments. Then she realized and she really, really loves him, and I think you can see the difference in there in the different pas de deux in between acts.
Mm-hmm. He comes around to being in love with you as well,
yes.
right? So then you transition into a more traditional pas de deux.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Karina did mention your love interest, Eros. You want to talk about him and how you get together and what your romance is like?
Yes. So I would say our story is a little bit more Jerry Springer, in the way that the whole reason that I meet Eros is that his mother, who is a god, a full god, right? Aphrodite, the most beautiful woman, most beautiful god that's a woman, something. She finds out about me, and so she sends her son to kill me because she finds out that there's a woman on earth to rival her beauty. So that's how I meet Eros, is he goes to like slit my throat and is like, oh, wow. So it's quite the setup. And I think our story with each other, that's not simple, but our story with each other and us falling in love is pretty simple. And I guess it's kind of fitting because he's the god of love, right, Eros, and Psyche means soul. So even though in this ballet she's quite comedic, and we see a lot of foibles. There is a purity to her, and it's like their souls recognize each other. That's how I like to think of it. So it is like a love at first sight, just like, oh, click. And that's sort of how we are. And then it gets really complicated because there's a couple things going on. He's got a mask on because he's a god and I'm not, and I'm not supposed to find out.
And somehow that
who he
means
is.
you can't tell because he has a mask on.
Right. And I'm not allowed to see his face, which is quite a challenge. So there's my first challenge, is a promise not to take his mask off. And lo and behold, we're married, and I want to see his face, and that's an issue. So there you have it. I won't say the whole story, but that's basically what we go through, stuff like that.
The curious moments that you were talking about earlier.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you feel like the pas de deux that you do with Eros are, like obviously Karina's first pas de deux is really different than classical ballet? Do you feel like yours is more traditional, or?
Actually, our pas de deux are pretty short, kind of like how I described, like, oh, we meet each other and there's this recognition and that's it. But they're really, really tricky, and I think that the choreography, and who knows if it's intentional, I hope everything is intentional, but I think it reflects what I'm talking about there being like a deep coordination and connection, because it looks easier than it is. We're doing really, really tricky stuff, and it just sort of goes whoop and flows. So it's deceiving in that way, because we do a lot of tricky partnering, but it looks very smooth, I think. Hopefully, yeah.
That's the goal. So I left you for the last because your relationship is different with Orion. And I wonder if you can talk about how you view it. And I have two words that are thinking in my head, but I don't want to say anything.
Okay. So Orion is kind of Artemis's best friend, her companion, her confidant. I don't think she gets a lot of support and a lot of love from her family. So she looks to him for comfort and for reassurance, and I think he is completely faithful to her. I think being, a huntress and traveling with your girl army is a little bit of a lonely life, and she finds comfort in him, and he hunts with her. And it's a little bit vague as far as the extent of that relationship, whether it's purely they're just friends and support each other, or if there is a romance there. And I don't think Stanton wanted to make that decision clear either. I think he wanted to kind of leave it open-ended, favoring the more friendship and less love. I think there's love there personally. I think the way they interact, most of the dancing that they do together is in secret when nobody else is around. And I enjoy it because I feel like you get to see a completely different side of Artemis, where normally in front of other people she has this hard edge, where she has these tender pas de deux with Orion. And actually most of the dancing that she does with him is either a vision or he's coming back from the dead. That doesn't really make sense either, but
But it's true, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can say, because I think probably most of these folks have seen it, he dies pretty quickly, so you only dance with the human Orion briefly.
And it's a lot of, like Melody said in her pas de deux, it's a lot of like quick little blurbs, because I feel like there's so much story to tell in this ballet, especially in Act 1, so it's hard to develop our character with the little bits of time that we have.
So I wonder, because you only dance with the real Orion briefly, do you think that she's imagining what could have been later on in the ballet?
That's a good question. Maybe. I think that she always wants there to be something more. And as a huntress, you're supposed to agree to celibacy, so having a lover is a big no-no. And I think that's a real big inner struggle with her. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. But you think there's love there?
I do.
Passionate romantic love.
And I think that's why it ties in, like, her being so open to, like, letting Sylvia go, because she sees that she's found love, and she's like, I didn't get that for myself, and I want you to be happy.
Oh, that's nice of her. Okay. Let's also. So we have our three heroines. They each have a love interest, and you can form your own opinion, I guess, when you see it about what the relationship between Artemis and Orion is. But they also each have a nemesis. So let's start with you, and you already talked a little bit about your nemesis, but let's talk a little bit more about that.
So yes, my nemesis is my twin brother, Apollo. As the curtain comes up, you see the two of them fighting off Niobe's army together, and they both go to Zeus, the dad, saying, look at the work I did. And he's like, oh, Apollo, you're just so wonderful, and leaves me in the dust. And I think that just is the start of how you perceive her and her brother. And Apollo loves it. He gloats in her face that he's the favorite, and it just like fuels the fire inside of her. I think Apollo also grows jealous of Artemis having this secret relationship with Orion, and he then plots a scheme to fool her, which results in I don't know how much I can give away, but yeah, everything.
I think you can, because it's all in the synopsis.
That's true.
Right?
Which results in me shooting Orion, like the one person that I care so much about falls dead at my feet, and it's because of my brother.
Your arrow, but because of your brother. Yeah.
Right.
Now you're on Jerry Springer.
There's a lot of it, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have resolution with him, with Apollo?
At the very end.
Yeah.
I think it takes until the very end of the ballet for her to finally be like, this is my time, and I'm going to stand up, and I'm going to get revenge and show everybody that he's the traitor. He's the one who made all of this happen. And you see, like, she loses it, and the fire comes out of her.
Do you think he feels resolved, or is it just that, okay, you've vanquished that nemesis and off he goes, and it's really about you? Do you know what I'm saying? Do you and Apollo really like shake hands and make up, or is it more no?
On stage, no. In my mind, I still think no.
Yeah.
I think at the start of when I like seek my revenge, I think Apollo's like, they're never gonna believe you. I'm still gonna win this. Like,
Yeah.
Dad's always gonna choose me.
Right.
And I think when Zeus finally says, "You're right, I've been neglecting you, and you are speaking the truth," and bans Apollo out, I think he's really like
Surprised.
put back in his
Yeah.
shoes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So your nemesis, Melody.
Aphrodite, mother-in-law. Yeah, so it's not super complicated with that either, but she goes to great lengths to try to get rid of me, and has a hard time for me just being a little mortal. But eventually she does win, and then my story is that I get brought back to life by this lady, which is pretty cool. But yeah, she's out to destroy me. She's got a weird relationship with Eros as well.
There's a lot of weird relationships we've been talking about.
But yeah, from the get-go, she's after me. So she
I
would
guess
be
we
my
should have
arch
guessed that when
nemesis.
you said that she sent Eros to kill you, that would be your nemesis.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a resolution for them?
So this is one thing that I love about Psyche. So the reason I wanted to mention her name, and Psyche means soul in Greek, is that I feel like there is that sort of like love will overcome, like that purity overcomes, and at the end, what's her name? What's my nemesis's name?
Aphrodite.
Aphrodite. There's so many names in this ballet too. She's standing there fuming that I'm like not dead and now accepted and come back to life and all this stuff. And I just run up to her and give her this big hug and kiss and am oblivious
She's
to
our
any
flower
wrong
child.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's her version of resolution, I think.
And actually, now that we're all talking about these details, I mean, really, while you have the non-traditional pas de deux, maybe you have the most sort of ballet traditional nemesis, because this is all sort of familial and complicated. And you want to talk about Alpheus?
Alpheus, yeah. So, yeah, the bad guy. Yeah, so I guess he's obsessed with Sylvia. So he's kind of always looking around. Even when she's with the army, he's there. He's behind, looking at Sylvia. And finally, there is a moment that he comes with his river gun. I just rolled the R really good. River gun. And so yeah, so that's actually my favorite moments in the whole ballet, because that's when Sylvia fights with him and the river gun. And the first time, so the only way that he took Sylvia is because he take the shepherd, and Sylvia has to kind of let go the sword and say, okay, don't kill him, just take me away. The second fight, that's when shepherd comes and find her on in the underworld, and that we fight again. Again, this the second fight is actually my favorite. But and yeah, she actually has him, and she lets him go. So that kind of shows, I think, to the audience and how powerful she is. Then she actually can kill Alpheus, but she lets him go and say, "Hey, I know, stop it." And that's how the two big fights in the ballet happens.
And that's it, right? Once she lets him go, we don't see him anymore.
Yeah, I think she decides, and he becomes water, especially with the beautiful projections that we have.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit, while we're here, talk a little bit about fighting and how you learned that and what it feels like? I mean, it's not typical. We have warriors with bows and arrows and at the beginning, and certainly isn't, oftentimes we see men with swords in ballet, but not always women. So just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so once a year, I think we have a person that comes to teach us sword safety classes, but nothing compares with what actually we do in the fights. So it took us a while to, especially for me, to understand how to manipulate the sword, and also it's pretty heavy. They're really heavy, especially when you're hitting the boys, and they come with force. So to kind of stop that force, it took a while to understand it. For me, it was more even how I standed, like how I used my feet. Normally, we were trained to be always en dehors and pretty and in tendu, and still, this is my third time doing the role, and still I get corrections like you have to be grounded, you have to be stronger. The interesting thing is like I have trouble, it's not the one that I'm fighting with, it's the other arm. Then somehow it just get lost. So I constantly have to remember, like, the energy has to, be not just the feet and the sword, but also my other arm. But yeah, it's a challenge for sure. To also remember the choreography. He has a specific, counts and movements and different boys in every corner to fight. I have to say that my first dress rehearsal, the river gun has big things, monsters coming off their heads. And of course, we don't rehearse with that. And then the first time I fought with them, the thing comes on my eye. So the first dress rehearsal, I was blind, fighting with them. So that was very interesting. So, I feel like every time you find a new challenge, especially during the fights with the boys.
And so did you have like a fight choreographer, or did Stanton?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Stanton came. He was great, just doing it very slowly, and still after how many years we've been doing it, like I said, this is my third time, and we still go slowly before rehearsals through the fights to kind of remember, counts and directions. And there is something that they really care is that we don't get too close of the fingers, just because we come with so much force. And depending of the sword, how you are, aligning the sword, you can actually get to the fingers of the boys. So we go slowly every time until we cannot really get it. And in the moment when you're doing the run, you kind of get excited and think, that's when I feel like I have to concentrate and be, okay, this is fun, but also there is a lot of choreography that we have to take care of.
Be safe somehow.
And be safe.
So related to that, we talked a little bit about this before. You're both warriors and have a toughness to you, and I wonder how, as you know, that compares to other lead females that you've done. I mean, I know that Stanton is well known for creating ballets that have strong women. Cinderella's a great example of that. Juliet's a great example of that. But this is a sort of next level strong woman, and I wonder if both of you can talk a little bit about how your heroine differs from sort of other lead females that you've done.
I think in a visual sense, being these warrior women, he wants us like you were talking about, a stance. It's like we have a lot of open leg stances, which isn't normal. You'd always be usually with your legs crossed in a V plus, or something more ladylike, where I think a symbol of power is this kind of grounded body language. And I think that's something that all the girls in the Army are constantly struggling with, and that they are reiterating to us to get that visual across. Other than that, I don't know. He does have some strong women in their personalities and the way they want to make their own decisions, and
So it feels sort of on a continuum for Stanton.
in relating to maybe Cinderella more so. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say that I feel like it's very his language of portraying a strong woman, and not just because I think the character of that's what the ballet is about, but I found in his choreography, I feel he doesn't make you feel like you're less than the man. You're always, even choreographically, like you're doing these strong jumps, and you see girls doing double saut de base in the air, like compare with other choreographers. Like I think he loves that. And one of the things that I actually, when I danced the first time his ballet, that's one of the things that I fell in love, because he makes you feel like you're strong. And normally in other ballets, you're always the victim, or you're fragile, and but no, he likes that. And I think especially during Sylvia, it's finally, we have a reason to kind of portray that. And it feels good. It feels good to be that superwoman, on stage. And even just the way that you stand, it feels good.
I mean, Melody, I don't mean to keep skipping you, but you aren't a warrior. But you've danced a bazillion strong Stanton female roles. Where does Psyche fit in for you in terms of his characters that he's created?
Well, she's definitely not just blatantly strong, and she's not a warrior. I think, I was just thinking about that moment that I said about her hugging and kissing this goddess who has tried to kill her multiple times and fooled her and tricked her. And so I think she has her own strength, and it kind of comes in a different form. And strength can be fighting, or strength can sometimes be forgiveness and moving on and saying, like, I rise above that, because that's who I am. So maybe in her own way, she's a bit of a gentler strength.
And she's got a fearless streak, I mean, we like to say that maybe her curiosity is her nemesis, but at the same time, she does know the consequence, and she pushes anyway.
That is true. I would say that, there's that quote that there is no courage without fear, and she goes into hell as a mortal, and she's scared. And you see that in her choreography a lot, actually. She'll be like, you want me to go in there? And she'll be like, ugh, and then she's like, okay, I'm going. So she always has that sort of push of courage, of facing things. Yeah, so I guess that's part of her too.
In Act 1, I think a lot of our audience has seen it, but it's been a while. We're really introduced to each of you separately, and it's really, I think, important as a viewer to sort of look at the costumes and understand. We've got the gold fabric, which isn't out today, but the gold fabric for the gods of Olympus, and the silvers and grays and whites for the demigods, and Artemis's army, and then the earth tones, and you are the only person in pink, I'm pretty sure, in the whole ballet, which is not common. But just to keep it, because there's little vignettes all the way through Act 1, but you're really separate. And then in Act 2 and 3, your stories enmesh. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what you think your heroine, what her relationship is to the other two. And Melody, you want to?
I mean, I have the least interaction when I'm conscious with anyone else. Because a better part of the second act, I am dead. So I wake up and just have all this gratitude for Artemis. And I just feel like Psyche makes these quick connections. She's like, I love you. And that's it. So my answer's short. I mean, that's about it. Even with Sylvia, we don't have a direct interaction, but she's responsible for calling Artemis to bring me back to life when I expire. So,
why do you do that, Karina? Why do you care about that?
Well, because Eros trying to explain to Artemis that it wasn't me who made this whole drama happen. So that's when I called Artemis to come to explain what's going on. So I think our relationship is very quick, like you're saying. It's very short. I think I have more interaction with Artemis, especially when you let her go and find the shepherd, and which I think that's when everything kind of comes back together. But I think with you in the third act, you guys are the ones that help the shepherd to become a god. So
that is true. I will say, I do get to be a demigod in the end. And I do help a sister out because I come back and we do some magic and help her have her happy ever after.
So because you're going to live forever, you help him live forever, right?
Yeah, so I think it's actually a very clever way to portray how Sylvia doesn't get old and the shepherd is getting old. So in only, I want to say less than 5 minutes, he shows how we have children's, grandchildren's, and grandchildren's, and you can see that the shepherd is going to go away. There's no, they're not going to be together forever, and so that's how they come to the story and help the shepherd to become a god.
And all that happiness doesn't really happen for you. You bring her back to life, then Psyche helps the shepherd live forever. But what do you make of your final moments with Orion?
I think there's resolution in that. I think it takes the guilt, a little bit of the guilt away, because she is responsible for his death in the end. And after she kind of fumes up with Zeus and he forgives her, he then puts Orion in the constellations where they can be together forever, and like a vision or him as a star, however you want to see it, comes back, and we do this really lovely parada at the very, very end. But yeah, I think that's definitely happiness for her, and peace with what's happened, and also peace with her father. So I think, yeah, it all kind of...
Does that parada feel different than the others?
Oh, for sure. The last time that she dances with Orion in Act 1 is after she's killed him, and she's kind of going through the motions in her head, and it's like a parada, and he's like this vision, but then she never really sees him, and then, it's like the smoke is gone, and she's, was he there? What happened? So yeah, I think that parada at the very end is finally them happy together. Yeah.
So it's been 3 years since we've done this, since it was created. And that's really important, I think, that these characters were created on you. So you are infused in them, no matter who's dancing them. I'm wondering what it feels like to return to the ballet, to return to the character, right? When you did it in 2019, you were still learning who they were and remembering steps and all of that, and I wonder what it feels like to return.
Yeah, I have to say then, this time around, when you repeat a ballet, it's just 10 times easier. First, you have been there, you're not thinking about the music, the counts, the steps anymore. It's just comes so natural. I have to say that I understand the story better this time around, and totally makes sense now. I see everything really makes sense in the choreography. But I think right now, especially with Connor, like we know each other so well, and I think we're just trying to really trust each other. Like I think before there's still these constant fights of, weight, like I need this weight, my weight this way or this way. And I think right now it's just trying to really feel each other and enjoy what is happening. We know it so well. It's in our bodies. So I think my goal is to just really enjoy every second of it, because I feel like I'm confident of what we're doing right now.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It was super comfortable to go back to it, and almost to the point where we were like, oh, okay. So it gave us more room to develop our story a little more, because we have a lot of little intricate stories and interactions to tell in fast moments. So it sort of turned our attention to some of the details. But yeah, super comfortable. I think, like you said, 10 times easier returning to it. It's like very, very much in our bodies together. So it's cool.
I think the staff was impressed on how quickly it came together. It was like days, and they're like, well, that's ready for the stage. Back in Nutcracker time. But yes, I think I'm more aware now of my interactions with like other characters that I wasn't maybe so sure of before, and how all of our little threads weave together. And also now being able to watch or like look at Act 1, that there's so much story, and all these relationships they happen so fast, these little scenes. So trying to be as clear as possible with the dialogue that I'm trying to say, so that it comes across to the audience, I'm more, I think, aware of now.
And you've switched Orions, and so we were chatting a little bit about that beforehand. You want to talk a little bit about this Orion and how that feeds the relationship?
Yeah, so I danced with Chen Wei before, who's lovely. He's just like a ball of happiness all the time, which made that relationship so easy. And Chen Wei just has crazy strength and could make anything happen, but sometimes you're like, well, what kind of Chen Wei am I going to get tonight? But it made it exciting. So now I'm dancing with Chris Coomer, who I've known, oh my goodness, could be 20 years. I've known him since I was a teenager. So I feel like our relationship now as these two characters is like based on real life. And yeah, I know him more than a lot of people in the world even. So I think we have a special bond in that way. He's also a wonderful and reliable partner who's so consistent. And he did the part last time as well, so he was just as familiar. So it was an easy switch.
That's cool. So before I open it up to questions, and I promise that I will, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the set. Jerome Kaplan's beautiful costumes, but also his set is large but simple, so that it can be the surface on which, and that Karina alluded to this before, we have this gorgeous ongoing set of projections. And I know that when you learned the ballet initially, you didn't really get under and through and in the projections until you were on stage. And I wonder about what is, it's so, from the audience perspective, it's unbelievable how much the projections make us go from being on Mount Olympus, then we're in Hades, and then we're on Earth, and really transform us. But I wonder what it feels like to be in there. Can you see it? Can you feel it?
I have a feeling I'm the one who actually gets to see some of it the most, because I actually turn around when I'm going into hell. And so, usually we're facing the front, or if we're turning, we're facing the side, but we're not seeing what the audience sees. So I don't see the projections at all, except for in that one scene, and then I turn around and the whole stage is on fire. And that's pretty spectacular. But for me, that's my only glimpse of the projections, and it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say then the second act, when Sylvia is underworld, like the water scene, the difference that I feel compared with any other ballet is it has to be darker, like the stage has to be dark, so you see the projections more. So that was a challenge the first few days, because it was very dark. We normally, it's dark in the front, but we have lights from the side, but it took me a while to really understand what was happening. Also, I feel like you can see the projections in the floor, so especially during the solo, you see the floor moving like water, and I remember being so embarrassed, because I was like, I know I can dance, I know I can be on my legs, but seeing the floor moves around, it drew me, especially the first few days. So now, especially through that solo, I have to look differently. Like, I can just look out. I have to be very under, just so I don't feel that movement and the projections affect me. But that's the only section that I feel I see it happening.
I didn't know half of what was happening until I watched the video. There's so many effects, especially when I'm sword fighting, and then it just like a ripple, or like shooting a bow and arrow, and there's an effect going with the timing of my arrow musically. It's fascinating how it all works. I remember having that first scene where we shoot, having to do it over and over, and I knew something was happening with projections, but I had no idea until I got to watch it from the front. So yeah, I learned a lot from the other side.
Yeah, I mean, you get the sense of, you really are transported. I mean, and I was, when you go to a Disney and you're in those same things that take you to different worlds, it's a little bit more, I wondered if it was as immersive as that, but it's really more designed for the audience to see. All right, it's the time for me to turn this over to questions. Does anybody, I'll start in the dance lab. Does anybody have anything they want to ask? Yeah. So the question is, because they're returning to these characters, is there any way the dancers are going to adjust their approach or to the technique or the artistry or interpretation of any kind of adjustments as we revisit it?
Well, I mean, choreographically, we have to kind of stay for what we have, but I do think now we can go farther for sure. Of even choreographically, I think we can even go farther in the steps and especially in the partnering. I feel like because we're feeling so confident, I think we can go even more, which is great. And then we have found out a couple times in rehearsals that like I go even more, and then okay, that's too much, like let's go back. And but I think that comes from being so comfortable in the role that I think it's making it more fun this time around. I think for sure we're all enjoying the process and looking forward to just do it and see what else we can bring on stage.
I think we all have some tricky partnering. Maybe for me personally, there was a move specifically that it would always happen, but it would be a little rough or like a little messy. And I was telling Jen, I was like, now with Chris, who's a perfectionist when it comes to partnering, like We have workshopped that lift, and it is buttery smooth now. So I think everything's getting like a nice polish, maybe.
I can't add too much to that. There's just more space when you're more comfortable. So there's less things happening in my brain now. So I have more space to play with timing or be more present or be more in a way, because everything piles up with a new creation and you have to get all these things done, and now you don't have to think about it so much. So I think maybe it'll be kind of more spontaneous almost in a way, because we can just be there with it.
I think it's interesting that you both referred to that as space. You know, that you've like you've opened up by knowing it so well, by letting go of the running list of things you have to do in your head. You've created more space for yourself. That's really interesting.
I've got a comment. As a patron and seeing it the first time, it was extremely complicated. And I had a chart and arrows going to who belonged to who, and the lovers and the underworld. And tonight it really cleared up a lot of that. And I feel more relaxed about it also. Seeing you all saying that.
Yeah, Jim's saying that it is true. When you decide to make a ballet with 3 heroines, with 3 separate lovers, with 3 separate nemeses, if that's how you say it, like that is complicated to tell 3 stories, and you can't have any words. That listening to them talk about their characters and their story tonight is helping. Again, you practiced by seeing it the first time too. You got the first.
Took my notes with me.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, yeah.
I think Stanton's also, in a few of our group scenes, made things more clear, like having everybody's focus go to the focal point to be like, okay, this connection needs to be made. Yeah. When there's so many people on stage, it's kind of hard to know where to look and what's important in the story. So I think a little bit of that is becoming clearer too.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there is 2 casts for the lead roles. So yeah, we each perform I think there's 4 for the first cast and 2 for the second cast.
Could I ask you back? I'm sorry if that's not too embarrassing.
Oh, so Sylvia's second cast is Jacqueline Long.
And my second cast, like last time, is Monica Gomez.
And mine, like last time, is Yuriko Kajia.
So this is the second time. So this is the second time that y'all are performing Sylvia here. Has it ever been done somewhere else?
Yes, so Australia Ballet did it in 2019. So I have the blessing to be a guest artist in the Sydney Opera House. So when they opened there, Connor and I performed. We did 3 shows with the company in there, which it was so interesting because to see another company to take your role, it was so inspiring. And also it also clarified things for me too, like, oh, I didn't know I was portraying it that way, or was interested to see, oh, I love how you do it. So yeah, I think I actually kind of taking a little bit of that too, of my experience dancing with Australian Ballet this time around too.
And it was at the time a co-production with the Australian Ballet. And they did it in Sydney and
Melbourne, yeah.
Melbourne. And so a fun fact is that because it was a co-production, they built, when you see the enormous set, they built it in such a way that they could, because one of those 2 theaters, I can't remember.
The Sydney Opera House is small.
And so that they can, like what they do with touring Broadway shows, that you're able to take Jerome Kaplan's design and make it smaller, which is going to be great when Houston Ballet tours this too, because it's so enormous, but yet we can make a smaller version. So it was an advantage there's a lot of advantages about having a co-production, but that's certainly one. Tori, do you have anybody? No, in the chat? Okay. Anybody else? Want to make sure we included our live stream folks. Going once, going twice. Well, a special thank you to the beautiful ladies of Houston Ballet. We wish you wonderful performances this weekend in Jewels and then an amazing run of Sylvia. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming out.